people who are being the loudest wackadoodles online realize that their reactions get clicks.
So then what's Tucker Carlson doing? Because I don't believe he is just chasing money and clicks.
Well, I think, and maybe it's with Candace too, but I think predominantly he's chasing relevance. There are voters across the country who will turn out and vote for Donald Trump who won't turn out and vote for normal
You've got to put Trump on the ballot then.
Look, JD Vance, I think, is a great messenger. I think that he's a great leader.
Welcome to Erika Kirk Saves the West, the show where American grit meets British backbone. Is it all going a bit wrong for MAGA? Donald Trump's facing accusations he's losing that magic touch. He's talking about ballrooms and saying that affordability is a hoax, while prices, apart from gas, admittedly, continue to rise. Is he out of touch with the base that put him in power? Lots to focus on that in the run-up to the midterms. But meanwhile, some of those influencers, some of the biggest names of the right, some people that previously supported Donald Trump, are all at each other's throats. We'll discuss all of that, what's going on, and how can this administration get out of the mess, and does any of it actually matter? Is the commentator Luke Ball. Luke, we'll talk about Donald Trump and, you know, his messaging and whether he's out of touch and should be building a golden gilded ballroom at a time of a continued cost of living crisis across America. But first of all, I just want to get into this, like, MAGA online war. There's some pretty grim stuff that's been happening since the death of Charlie Kirk. Candace Owens and her ilk have been basically questioning the official narrative. The guy who pulled the trigger is in court today even, yet she's suggesting it's the Egyptians, it was the French, it was the Israelis. You know, there's even suggestions that she's going to dox where Charlie Kirk has been privately buried. His widow took to Fox News earlier this week and told her, for the love of God, shut up. I mean, what is going on? And is this a sort of deliberate attempt to divide and drag down the movement that has been so spectacularly successful for the right for the last few cycles?
It's a deliberate attempt to try to get her more money and more fame, and it's disgusting. The people who are being the loudest wackadoodles online realize that their reactions get clicks, that the comments that are underneath any of the posts that they give, the crazier they are, the larger the response. Even if it's negative press, they get clicks, they get ad revenue, and that's disgusting, especially when you're doing it on the death of Charlie Kirk. And I think that ultimately, Charlie Kirk was probably the conscience of our movement and the next generation. And when that conscience disappeared, everyone seemed to scatter a little bit. We didn't know what direction we were going. And the quickest to rush to bringing any sort of coherent message were not getting listened to. They were getting drowned out by the incoherent idiots who were screeching and saying that they are, as you were just saying, going to dox his grave. I mean, my gosh, there is no conscience remaining. And I disavow them as part of the Republican or conservative movement. They need to name their own movement and call it something else, because it has nothing to do with the work that we're doing up here in DC and across the nation.
So Turning Point are going to host a friends and family of Charlie's event. I believe it's just coming up this weekend, where they're finally actually going to take on what Candace Owens, for example, has been saying about the death, the assassination, the murder of their leader, and the subsequent sort of reorganisation of Turning Point, which she sees a conspiracy in every angle of that. Do you think they've been... I mean, it's hard to criticise because obviously you don't want to get in the gutter, and they should have been allowed time to grieve privately. Of course they should. But do you think they've been too slow in actually putting a stamp down on the stuff that's been circulating online?
Not really, because in comm strategy, you're looking at how deep the message is going. And if it goes so far that people don't stop ignoring it or continue to listen to it and consume it, you have to do something. So they've watched and been like, okay, it's gone way too far. We actually have to do something to address it. And the best way to do it is to confront her with truth. And so I hope they are able to bring her to a point of public humiliation where they confront her with these facts, where they confront her with the information, and frankly, with Erika Kirk herself, because I think that Candace Owens has become a bit of a keyboard warrior. I don't see her out in public a lot doing these sort of interactions. I don't think that a lot of the things that she's saying behind the screen she would do in the same manner if she were in front of somebody. And unfortunately, the rise of of whatever she's doing over there has coincided with an enormous amount of conspiracy theories getting fed online.
Yeah.
And that's disgusting. And it's distracting from any wins that we might be having as a result of the Trump administration itself, because people just label us as conservatives all in one bunch.
Exactly. Remarkable how the one time that the one time she's busy is the time that Turning Point have invited her to come and face-to-face debate some of the claims she's making. So your point is that she's doing it for money rather than any sort of malicious intent of trying to destroy the movement, so to speak.
I don't know of anybody, I can't think of anybody who has such malice in their heart that would go out and say the types of things surrounding Charlie Kirk's death. If you have people online who are like casting aspersions on the facts or coming up with crazy conspiracy theories, like that's one element. But Candace is somebody who has been out there and has really taken the mantle of conservatism for like a long period of time and then pivoted so hard. My question is why? And there's been no true reason that there should be this much malice in between her and Charlie Kirk or the Turning Point crowd.
Who she says was his friend.
Yeah, of course. And so when we see that happening, it's probably because there's other idiots out there who are getting a rise in popularity and fame off of saying the worst things. So they're just trying to run to the left or the right of one another and outflank the commentary to get those followers and those clicks. It's something that's really concerning me. I hope that people in my movement, the conservative movement, the Republican movement, completely disavow it, because even if they play footsie with it a little bit, even if they're like, oh, well, some of the things that this person says is accurate, you are legitimizing the entire operation. You can agree with elements of policies and bring them into your own ideology and say, like, I agree with these ideologies, but I disavow this individual, because the more you feed into that, you feed into the rise of people like Candace.
So then what's Tucker Carlson doing? Because I don't believe he is just chasing money and clicks. I mean, he's probably got enough money for now to see him up in his log cabin through his later years. But then he's not, he came on this show and he had a right old go at me when I suggested that he should put a bit of distance between what Candace is saying and his own views. He's platforming Nick Fuentes and giving him a massively, soft soap interview. It does strike me that is there not something slightly weirder going on than just people chasing eyeballs and YouTube revenue?
Well, I think, and maybe it's with Candace too, but I think predominantly he's chasing relevance. I think
relevance rather than actual cash.
Yeah, because once he lost that platform, he had to stay relevant somehow, and everybody can go interview a member of Congress, but, who is so bold as to go platform somebody who said horrific things, and because of that interview, got the interactions online that got people talking about him once again. And I really appreciated a lot of his commentary over the years, but the way that he has trended recently, it has been to cast legitimacy on the darkest corners of the internet with some of the darkest individuals out there, and I strongly dislike that. So it just really pains me to see that that's the trend that the media is going, that you're chasing relevance for yourself or you're chasing money for yourself. And I don't know what any of these people's true motivation is, but if it's to just get relevance or money or fame or whatever for yourself, number one, that's so fleeting. And number two, if you're doing it at the demise of others or the pain and suffering of others, that has no place in our conservative tent.
And so then how damaging is the cause? I mean, you've got Nick Fuentes, a very articulate, dare I say, a funny guy, spouting some of the most outrageous kind of thing, completely off the wall bigotry. I mean, but he does it with such such an ease that, as he explained to Piers Morgan this week, he doesn't give a fuck. He just doesn't. He doesn't accept the labels. He doesn't accept the guardrails. He doesn't accept the boundaries. It's very hard for the traditional conservative movement and the MAGA movement to stay together when you've got figures within the right who are just blowing up the system.
Yeah, and they're blowing up the system because they realize there can be gain in themselves for it. And you're right that when you sit in front of a camera all day long and for years, like this guy's been around for a long time. I remember like in DC, there was a local group that I think it was affiliated with a PragerU or a 501c4, something like that. And we were trying to like do legitimate work. And he was in the chat for some reason, was just saying horrific things. So if you do this for like a decade, then maybe you can string some sentences together better than a lot of other people. But the only way you're going to be able to counter any sort of online savviness or clicks is with other people who have better clicks and more savviness and are able to confront with truth and embarrass those who are out there saying things that are absolutely off the wall. So that's why when we saw Charlie Kirk get murdered and all of these others started rising to prominence, it was almost as if Charlie had really kind of boxed out a lot of other people.
He was a bulwark against a lot of
movement. Yeah. Yeah, for the good of the movement too, because then when he was gone, all of these others suddenly buoyed to the top, and we need more people who are able to press down the ridiculousness of these individuals. Because yeah, they can make a joke or they can come across well on camera or say these things, but ultimately, if it's leading to the downfall of the country, we need people with some sort of a moral conscience to be able to stand up and call that sort of stuff out.
Then the leader of the movement, the president, he's in the White House at a time when he says and makes very, articulately that, Antifa are on the rise, left-wing terrorism. They're taking shots at Charlie Kirk. They're taking shots at ICE officers in Texas. The left is still reeling, punch drunk from the 4th of November last year. Really, they don't know what they're doing. This is the time that the right should be doubling down on its victory from last year and pushing it. But yet it seems the sort of White House is sort of kind of zoned out of all this stuff and don't really care.
I think it's been an interesting few weeks, and I think it's been partly because there's been a little bit of a transition from a mentality of we're running the government to now we have to start thinking about the midterms.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't count the president out at all, and I wouldn't count this White House out at all. Maybe this is the time with the teams in the huddle and not necessarily on the field. And over the last few days, you've seen folks like Susie Wiles, who's been a personal friend of mine for several years since running a campaign in 2018 for DeSantis, who has been the smartest person in politics that I know of today. And she has basically gone out and said, look, we're going to upend the midterms on its head. There are voters across the country who will turn out and vote for Donald Trump who won't turn out and vote for normal
You've got to
Republicans.
put Trump on the ballot then.
Yeah, and she said that specifically. We are going to put Donald Trump on the ballot. He's going to be on the ground. I traveled with the president for years, and it was during the last midterm elections when he was holding rallies all over the place and was traveling with him the last week of the campaign. The guy still can run circles around a lot of people in politics. And so I think that when you start to put him on message again and get him out in front of the American people, then you're going to see a little bit of a shift in momentum. Now, I will concede that generally the midterm elections are when the party that's out of power, especially when you have a trifecta of the House, Senate, and the White House that they don't have, comes roaring back into power in some way because their base is more motivated because they've sat on the sidelines for 2 years. But I'm interested to see how a Donald Trump candidacy, even though his name is not at the top of the ballot, but putting him out on the game field actually changes the dynamic of things.
Yeah, I mean, we saw him in Pennsylvania this week, but it was a kind of vintage, vintage stump speech, really, from the president. But, a billionaire guy telling people to only buy 1 or 2 dolls this year for their kids rather than 3, and saying the economy is A++++, when actually, gas prices aside, I'll give you that. Actually, the economy isn't A+++. So, Wall Street might be doing well, but Main Street's still feeling a pinch.
I think there are many elements of the economy that are doing better, but to your point, it was James Carville, the Democrat strategist, that said you can't give the American people stats and figures and convince them the economy is doing well. They have to feel it in their heart and in their pocketbook. And we had that criticism against Joe Biden the last time. So exactly. I agree that going out and saying that the economic messaging or affordability is a scam, I get what he's saying, that they're trying to reframe it in order to try to get through socialist policies. Like, I get that, but it's not going to go well, right?
Yeah.
That needs to change. We need to get back on message. And I've heard folks like James Blair, the Deputy White House Chief of Staff, go out there and say, you're going to hear the president fine-tune the messaging on the economy and affordability, and we're going to make sure that he's out there front and center messaging on it. And so I also said this a few months ago. I'm not an economic strategist. I don't play one on TV. But the tariffs had a finite period of time to prove themselves. And if they aren't doing the job that the president wanted them to do as we get closer to the midterms, they have to go away. They have to get peeled back. We have to be able to stimulate the economy. Maybe we are bringing on manufacturing, but with the American people, it's not what have you done for me, it's what have you done for me lately. If they go into the voting booth this upcoming midterm election and they don't feel like the economy is doing well and it's a result of policies that maybe benefit America in the long term, we're not going to have the opportunity to try it out because we're not going to be in power anymore. Scott
Bessent seems to insist that, just hold tight and come the springtime, things are going to look rosy. I mean, that's a dangerous game to play, isn't it? It's on a hope and a prayer. A lot can happen in the next 6 months that could knock the global economy, 7 ways of Sunday.
Yeah, you still got a little bit of time. If spring's the deadline, fine. But I don't know if I kind of felt like the timeline for the tariffs was a few months ago.
Yeah.
Like we would be able to try to see some sort of a pop in the economy then. It doesn't seem as if that has resonated very well because everywhere I look, there are news reports related to just how different sections of the economy are suffering for one reason or another. And if we wait till spring, that shortens the amount of time we have to do any sort of course correction on the back
Yeah.
end. So I'm not holding my breath for that timeline. I understand that the Treasury Secretary is, looking at a wide lens and saying, like, look what happened during the 4 years of Joe Biden. But we have such a finite period of time, really just a few months, in order to continue moving forward as Republicans with this trifecta that we have, then I'm not convinced that the tariffs staying for much longer is really going to do us any favors as we head towards the election cycle.
Yeah, and there's red lights on the dashboard, right? We saw Miami elect their first Democrat mayor in 28 years. This week. That's hardly, that's in his backyard.
That one,
right?
that one I think was probably the biggest bellwether. I don't accept the premise that Virginia and New Jersey were bellwethers for the midterm elections. Those are just independent states themselves. Virginia's purple. I really wish Glenn Youngkin were atop of the ballot this past time. I'm a Virginia resident. We just had a really weak candidate there. We had a moderate Republican candidate in New Jersey. I didn't think that the Republicans really stood an opportunity there. The one that I was looking at, like at the beginning of this year, Randy Fine had a special election, and the Democrats were saying he's going to lose or he's going to only win by single digits, and he won by like 14 points. Now, this last one in Tennessee was a little too close for comfort. I think that, if anything, along with the race down in Florida, was a bellwether. Maybe this is a little bit off topic, but I'm also sick of members of my own party acting like they got sent to Azkaban because they got elected to Congress, right? Like they're out here retiring and resigning and complaining. And
just when the going gets a bit tough.
No, be a team player. Like, stay on the team and suck it up. I mean, that's the only thing I can really say. I get a little irritated at my own party because they act as if it's the worst fate in the world to serve in Congress for a few more months. Like, you can say you're not going to run for re-election again, fine, but don't resign and leave the whole country hanging.
You say there's people in the White House, James Ball, Susie Wiles, who are desperately kind of, trying to keep the president back on, get the president back onto the economy, get him onto affordability. But he seems more concerned about his ballroom these days. And, he doesn't seem to be sending the right message to voters, which is, we're just going to demolishing the East Wing live on CNN and replacing it with a building twice the size of the original White House, mostly made of gold. It's kind of a perfect metaphor for having tin ears, isn't it?
I'm not a big fan of the ballroom, but also presidents change the White House. And
I know. But I mean, this president...
He's going to make his mark, right? The guy's a builder. He's going to make his mark. He's not going to be content with a little plaque in the hallway that says that he served there one time. He wants it to be the ballroom that is forever associated with him, so I get that. And he also understands, like, he's not going to have another, term in office in which to do that. But I would concede that it's probably not the best time when the top message... if the top messaging right now were the border crisis or law and order, then maybe we could be thinking along these lines, but maybe not while the economy is the top of the line.
Big speech by JD Vance next week, tying these two conversations we've been having today together quite nicely, actually. Turning Point have got their America Fest down in Phoenix. Obviously, it's going to be a big tribute to their slain leader. JD Vance topping the bill at that. He's been showing a bit of ankle of late, I think, in terms of, in the wake of the Virginia results and the election results, he did go public to say we need to be focused on the home front. A slight shot across the president's bows there on, who'd been jet setting around the world, focusing on the Middle East, focusing on Russia, focusing on Venezuela. Do you think we'll see the sort of start of the 28 campaign this week, next week down in Phoenix?
I think we've already seen it start. Honestly, I think that he's been out on the campaign trail. I've even seen the Supreme Court trying to figure out if this is allowed or something stupid like that under the rules. But look, JD Vance I think is a great messenger. I think that he's a great leader. It's going to be curious to see just what happens over the next few years. I hope that he is able to try and rein the conscience of the party in a little bit. And look, I'm fine with wearing the team jersey. Sometimes I'm more in the Freedom Caucus vein of the Republican Party. So sometimes we like to look at the rest of the tent and say what the heck are you doing over there? Let's actually get back to doing what we said we were going to do when we came to Congress. So if he's out there saying hey, we need to actually focus and pay attention to these
and stop
elements,
fighting, stop just knock it on the head, right? But he's got a very close relationship with Tucker. He knows these people. Would you like to see the vice president perhaps say, look, guys, come on, sort it out?
Oh, 100%, absolutely, and also like maybe the president can weigh in on it a little bit, but he's like got the freaking country to run.
Yeah.
Like, it's okay for him to focus on other things, and that's one of the reasons I like JD Vance is because as the vice president, he's been so savvy with the messaging. He's embraced memes about himself.
Yeah.
He did that Halloween costume, and he's gone on podcasts, and that was one of the major reasons that the president and the vice president were able to draw out the Gen Z vote and the younger millennial vote is because they embraced this new era of media, kind of like Obama did with the internet back in the day and websites and social media. You have to constantly be embracing this new media. And so I think he's probably the best one to do it because he's got the strongest platform and he can be the one out there messaging right now while the president and others are running the country. And if he does a good job at that, then I think that he's well positioned himself for a conversation about 2028.
Yeah, just don't tell Marco Rubio that just yet. You make him look even sadder. Luke
We'll
Ball.
keep it between us.
Exactly. Luke Ball, always a pleasure. Come back and see us soon. Keep us updated. Thank you for joining us.
We'll do it, man. Thank you.